Hello, and welcome to our coffee chat with APDT member Marissa Martino. We are here today with Devin from our Chronicle of the Dog, our editor, and today we will be chatting with Marissa and Devin.
Hi Marissa, this is Devin, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your background. I understand you left a corporate job to attend the Academy of Dog Trainers in San Francisco. I find that interesting.
Yeah, so I was living in New York City about in 2004, right after college, and I got a job at Martha Stewart Living, and I was doing exactly what I went to college for. However, I wasn't, and it was that moment where I realized, like, wow, there's so many parallels between how I'm showing up in my own life and how I'm showing up with my dog. And so this, for a few years there, I was working with Sully on his reactivity and feeling like, gosh, a lot of this really has nothing to do with him, because when I show up more grounded and when I show up more calm and I envision us having a successful interaction with other dogs or a successful walk, he can ground himself and be less reactive just based off of my energy. And so I have really worked very hard on not only, removing some of that perfection or expectation on him, but he is a constant reminder that I need to also do that for myself and everyone around me.
Well, in that regard, who is harder to train than in overcoming those issues?
Definitely
you or
me. Definitely me. I think humans, we're way more complex, and I think we have a tendency to get in our own way, and I definitely feel like it was me that is a lot harder, especially because I have more years experience of practicing a challenging behavior, which is holding myself to such high expectations and not creating any room for me to maybe show up less than perfect, right? So it was definitely me.
Well, could
Sully
you
was just along for the ride.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure he benefited from that. Could you explain briefly your 4 system relationships between a dog and its owner?
Yeah, so I had done a lot of work with a life coach at one point, and I was explaining to her my process of how I'm working with clients and how I'm working with dogs, and she has a dog, and so we were sort of talking about what goes on between a dog and a person. And she helped me actually design these 4 systems. And system 1 is, what is the dog's response to his or her world? So, how are they showing up? What gets them excited? What makes them really fearful? What makes them reactive? What makes them anxious? So really getting clear on who the dog is in relationship to his world. The second system is how the owner is responding to the dog. So lots of times I have a lot of clients that are responding with shame or embarrassment or frustration or encouragement, excitement. It's not all positive or all negative. It's definitely a combination of both. I mean, lots of times owners have such pride in how their dogs are reacting, and so it's more having to do with the owner. And then relationship 3 is, how are they interacting together? And so an example of this is Sully might be reactive. My dog, he might be reactive to the sight of other dogs, which is system 1. I then get frustrated with him, right, system number 2. And then from there, how do we continue to interact? Are we resisting against one another? Are we, is he resisting against my energy because he feels my tension? How do I respond to that? So that's really about how we come together. And then system number 4 is something that I think is so important in dog training that is kind of untapped right now, and I think this is where we're going to go with dog training is, so if I am a perfectionist towards Sully, or if I am tense with him when he shows up in a way that I don't necessarily enjoy, Am I doing that somewhere else in my life, towards myself, towards my partner, towards my colleagues? Like, is my reaction to him similar, whether that's a positive reaction or a negative reaction in other areas of my life? And the answer for me is yes. And the answer most of the time typically is yes. It's how are we showing up in all the relationships in our life, not just the one with our dogs.
Well, in your book you mention making the training fun for Sully whenever he was going into areas that could be scary, such as hallways. You were immediately prepared to see how his reaction might be in order to help stop it or to avert it. Did you ever have problems with dogs that seemed to be resistant to making training like this fun, and how did you handle that?
Absolutely. I think one of my favorite parts about dog training is, and doing private training where I'm working with people one-on-one, is figuring out what is going to work for this dog. So me making hallways in our apartment building, which is the circumstance in the book, making hallways appear really fun for him because I had conditioned him to be concerned because I was nervous dogs were going to pop out of the apartments. And even though I'm a trainer, I still conditioned him to be nervous. He and I already have a relationship, right? So I was able to get really playful, do his favorite games, do training outside in the hallway. I was able to do that because we had a relationship. With dogs that I'm working with, I don't have that relationship, especially if they're concerned about people. I think that's where it's, I have to work on going at that dog's threshold and getting really, really curious with the client to see what are the things that lights that dog up. And it could be that I'm standing 40 feet away while the owner is doing the engaging training games or playing with toys or just playing in general. So it all depends on what is the dog's comfort level with me or comfort level in their particular environment. And I'm always shooting to work under a threshold so that dog can learn new skills and be able to relax in that setting. So yeah, it happens often, and I think the biggest part is getting curious with the client and then just getting creative and trying new things and not being scared to do that.
Well, we've all been there where it's when they're having a good day and they're eager to learn and their mind is open, and your mind is open and everything just goes well. But then we've all had those days where from the moment you got up and you spilled coffee on your pants to being in traffic and then find out that you have extra work to do that you weren't prepared to do. You just one day after another of frustrations, and now you're going home to work with your dog. There's a client who's going home to work with the dog. How do you stop that cycle?
Mm-hmm. For me personally, I think it's just a really, really easy thing for us to miss, and it's so powerful, is just to sit there and breathe. And whether that's I do like a 4 count inward, I hold the breath for 4 counts, and then I exhale for 4 counts, and then I repeat the process. But I think it's so easy to do, and it can really help our nervous system, and it is often forgotten, right? So I have alarms set on my phone to remind me to breathe, so I really deep breathe, even if it's for just a minute, because that's sometimes all I have. And so for me, and then I also, if I am experiencing, like just in the past few days, I was experiencing like really silly things happening on top of one another, and I ask myself, like, what's going on with my energy? What is it that I am ask like what am I bringing in or what am I attracting right now? And it's just a simple shift of envisioning that my day is going to look better, my day is going to get better. We have a tendency as people, I think, to, oh wow, it started off really poorly, and then we just carry that energy into the rest, and then that just things just keep snowballing. And I believe wholeheartedly that we have control about how we show up in this world. And so for me, it's about breathing and then just remembering to switch gears emotionally and envisioning things happening in a better way that's more sustainable and positive for me. And sometimes that's harder to do than others, depending on how over threshold I have gotten.
I would imagine, but I think I can do the breathe part. Well, as you developed your philosophy on the human-canine behavior connection, when did it become apparent to you that you could turn this into a book?
That is a great question. Originally, I wanted to write an online course, and that is to come. But someone in our industry was very much like, you need to write a book first. Like, I think you have to get all this written down. I had all these ideas swirling in my head. I had huge Post-it notes all over my house with ideas. I had, I was recording information into my phone recording app on hikes. I mean, I had so much information swirling in my head, and finally someone said, I think you need to write it all down. And that's when I was like, oh wow, well, then I would turn it into a book. So I always knew that this was my calling to develop this and communicate it, and I'd like to have it be communicated in a variety of different ways, so it can reach a variety of different people. So it was that person that said, I think it needs to be a book first. So I'm super grateful for that person, and now it's here.
Well, when you mentioned it being written for a variety of people, I could see, did you initially write this book for trainers, your other colleagues, or as a training tool for your clients?
Yeah. So I originally wrote it for, actually not originally, I wrote it for dog owners. So whenever I was writing things down or thinking about topics, or it was always geared towards the dog owner. I have a lot of dog trainers that are reading it right now and find that it's useful, but it's not necessarily catered towards dog trainers currently. I do think that would be potentially a second edition to the book, or just a completely separate book of how you can incorporate some of these concepts into a private practice or training classes or whatnot.
Well, what type of response have you gotten from your clients about the book? And the book, by the way, we should mention, is called The Human-Canine Behavior Connection, A Better Self Through Dog Training.
Yes. I have received a lot of just overwhelming positive feedback. I'm really wanting someone to give me some constructive feedback, because I'm so grateful for the positive feedback, but I'm really excited to hear other ideas and other ways of taking this. And so I've had a lot of people in the industry that are trainers say really positive things about how they are also doing some of these techniques in their private practice, which is really great. And then I have had other trainers tell me how they really utilize it with their own dogs. And then a lot of my clients have just been really supportive. They've been given a taste of what's in the book, though, through my private practice. So not a lot of them are really surprised by the content, but they're happy to have it written in an actual book form, and there's exercises in there. So it's one of those books. I've received this particular feedback. It's one of those books where you could read over and over again. It's a short read. It's fast. There's exercise in it, and your answers to some of these exercises might change over time. I imagine that they probably would. So So yeah, I've received a lot of positive feedback reading it, and a lot of support from the community to help promote it, to get it out there, because people believe in the message, which is really amazing.
Well, I must admit I did enjoy the workbook aspect of it, where you say this, if this is happening, then look for this. It did make it easier to pay attention to some of those details that your animal is giving you, but you may not be paying attention to.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Now,
I'm happy to hear that.
Yes. So I'm sure that probably writing the book might have been the easiest part. Getting it published would have its own challenges. Could you walk us through what you decided or how you decided to publish the book?
Yeah, so I always thought of self-publishing. A lot of people, I actually thought that this book was originally going to be like a free PDF on my website, and another one of my collaborators was like, "You're crazy. This is don't just give this away for free." And so then she was the one that walked me through self-publishing through CreateSpace, which, by the way, is fantastic organization and the best customer service I've ever experienced, and super easy process. Like it's so easy. It's almost silly. And in the process, though, I had applied to Dogwise for them to publish it. And after I did speak to them, and we talked about this idea, and the only reason why I didn't go through the final process with Dogwise is because they wanted a portion in the book to be written for trainers, since that's kind of their audience, and they weren't going to be able to release it for another 18 months. And by that point, I was very much ready to, release this information into the world. So it was really more of this book isn't geared towards trainers right now, and I want it to be out in the world sooner rather than later. And so I decided not to go through that process with them, and I launched it through CreateSpace. And fortunately, Dogwise is now selling it, which is really, really great, and they've been so supportive of me, and so I really want to give them a shout out. And so it was just more of a timing thing, really, and CreateSpace, they honestly made it so easy that that wasn't really the hard part. The hard part now is marketing this book, right? It's constantly trying to find ways to get it out there, and I have so many different outlets that I'm trying to market through, and honestly, this whole process is really, really fun for me, and I've enjoyed all parts of it, even though it's been a ton of work.
I would imagine. Well, what suggestions would you have for other trainers who have material they would like to publish?
If they are wanting to publish materials, it depends. I think that if you wanted to do an article in Chronicle of the Dog or something like that, right? All I did was just reach out to you guys, right, and say, hey, here's some of my writing pieces. What are your thoughts? Do you guys have space for this? These are the things I'd like to talk about. Really just reaching out and putting yourself out there, because people need content wherever you go, whether it's a blog, a podcast, a magazine, and people really appreciate that, because if content's coming to them, that actually makes their life a little bit easier.
Yes,
if they're wanting,
true statement.
yeah, right. So in terms of a shorter content version, I would go that route. And in terms of publishing a book, I think being organized, and there's so many small tasks that went into this thing, from designing the cover to determining a title to figuring out resources to editing it to doing a landing page on your website. The list goes on, and I am sort of a Google Drive, Google Doc freak, and I have so many different organizational tools that and they also kept me very timeline driven, and so being organized, I think, and if you're not necessarily organized, like that is a strong suit of mine. If you're not necessarily organized, then I would ask for help. So get somebody else to hold you accountable, whether it's a friend or a colleague, or whether you download like task-driven apps or whatever, or a life coach, whatever it is that you need to get it done. Because I think if it hadn't been for that drive to get it out, or deadlines where I had promised other people that that I was going to be delivering it on a certain date, you know, you could sit there and write things forever. I mean, I'm sure there's a mistake in the book. I'm sure there's a grammar error. Like I'm sure of all of that, but it just takes, you just need to get it out and get it done.
Well, now that you've got a few years under your belt as a dog trainer and you've attended the Academy for Dog Trainers, what would you suggest they add to the curriculum?
Oh, that's really good. I think the Academy, so when I did in 2007 versus colleagues that are doing it now 10 years later, it's way beefier of a curriculum than what I received in 2007. I know that. And I also think that that's because there's a ton more research on canine behavior and cognition now than there was 10 years ago, which is really exciting for us. The one thing that I think, it's not necessarily to add it to the curriculum, but the difference between the program I did versus the program that's currently out there, and this is a challenge for a lot of dog training programs, is that there's not enough hands-on component. I think that being at the San Francisco SPCA and being able to work with a dog every single day, we had 3 training sessions, and I had a live person coaching me the whole way through, and then I had classmates to run ideas off of. That interactive 2-month process was so beneficial, I think, and just because that's the way that I learn best, is in person and doing it and very hands-on. So if there was a way for Jean to add that into the Academy, I think that would be great. However, I do feel like the content and the science and all of that she is teaching in the Academy is really, really top-notch. And so I would love to go through it again.
I'm sure there's always that extra bit that you can pick up when you go through a second time. Well, if you could suggest one tip, and it would be either to a trainer or a client, what would that be?
That definitely would be what the slide says, and it's to get curious. I think this is such an important skill that we have when we're young and we slowly lose because there's pressure to know everything. And I think trainers are actually pretty good at getting curious with the client about the dog, right? So, we're really, really good. I just did a training with some of my staff members, and I asked them, what are some of the curiosity questions we could ask this client to learn more about this situation? And they came up with amazing questions to ask about the dog's behavior, but we're not always so geared towards asking questions about the person's behavior. So, an example would be what gets in the way of you, when you didn't complete that exercise, like what got in your way? How did that impact you? Or what do you think you can do to change your dog's environment now? And what do you think? How do you think that that's going to impact your dog's behavior, right? So just asking questions versus jumping to teaching the person, I think, is really important, because then they are part of that collaborative process and they have more buy-in. And I would say that that's the same tip I would give to clients, which is basically continuing to ask questions about their dogs, right? They easily jump to shame or embarrassment, or easily jump to frustration, but instead of jumping to that emotion, can you look at it from your dog's perspective and ask questions? Is it about this particular environment? What happened earlier today to contribute to his behavioral response now? How am I showing up right now? Am I adding stress to the situation? And so just asking those same questions really helps everybody get on the same team.
Well, now, Marissa, as we wrap up this conversation, is there that one training moment with a client or experience you had that caused you to rethink how you were doing things, and what did you do?
Yeah, I have a client that I saw in Boulder that had a very reactive white German Shepherd, and I was having a lot of trouble with client compliance, and his situation was just really tricky. He couldn't drive. He lived in the heart of the city. The dog was becoming more reactive. He couldn't take him on walks. It was a really challenging situation, and I find that as trainers, we sort of stay in our own space and try to come up with the answers on our own, and that is really isolating. And for me, being a really heavy extrovert, I love collaborating with people and talking with people and building community around me. And so I did reach out to a trainer that I felt was really great with reactivity, and I brought her onto the case and sort of use it as, I said, I'm just going to be here. I want to see what you decide to do. No one has to pay me. I'd rather just sort of like transfer the information and transfer the client to you, but I still want to be a part of it so that I can learn and see, what am I missing? I want another set of eyes. And she came in and really helped both the dog and me sort of see a few things that I might have been missing because I was just really wrapped up in trying to help this guy and help his dog. And so from that point, I really started to just ask for help, regardless if another trainer was going to judge me for not knowing the answer, regardless if I felt incompetent or whatever it was. I tried to really just put my ego aside and say, like, I need help. I want to ask people. And I have found that in Boulder and Denver, in the communities that I have my private practice in, there's a lot of really, really amazing trainers here, and they all have great experience. And when we get together, we come up with a lot of really good information. And so it's wonderful to be a part of community that is collaborative in that way. And so I just remind myself to just, lose the ego and ask for help when I need it, because I think that that's really important. That not only benefits me, it benefits the other trainers, and it's going to benefit the dog and the owner. So.
Well, thank you very much, Marissa. I think this has been a very enlightening period of time that we've had to chat with each other. And good luck with the book. And again, that book is called The Human-Canine Behavior Connection, A Better Self Through Dog Training by Marissa Martino.
Thank you so much.